yeah, I felt like you were kind of going through the system and then you were being spit out at the end of the system, like kind of like
Right.
half the person you were before. Like, yeah, somehow I was supposed to be helping others and helping heal
Yeah, and
others,
it
yet
comes from
I
your
was,
expense. Yeah, that's what
yeah.
I feel.
And it's a ticket talking Mazda for the biggest. That's a comma and a comma and a comma. Gotta get it. And it's a ticket talking Mazda for the biggest. That's a comma.
Hi, Valerie. Nice to see you again.
Hi, it's great to be here.
Thank you for coming on my platform. And I know that your story, your journey will inspire a lot of moms out there. And let's get into it. I would love for you to share a little bit about your background and what you do.
Sure, sure. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so happy to be here. So I'm Valerie. I'm a medical doctor, a wellness coach, and a mom of three little ones, 7 and under. And I guess like it all started for me, like from a young age, I kind of knew that I wanted to be in a helping role of some sorts. I wanted to help people and wasn't sure exactly how, but I ended up on my path getting into medical school, which was really exciting and felt like the right choice at the time. And yeah, it just really like all my passions with like health and wellness and psychology, understanding people, it seemed to all mix it together, which was really great for me. And I think like in medical school was the first time I really had a lot of things going on. Like I met my now husband, I was falling in love, I was studying really, really hard. I had, a lot of commitments, friends, things going on. It was my first time where I lived far away from home. And yeah, there was just a lot going on. And then once I reached sort of my clinical years at medical school, where I was working in the hospital, 24 to 30-hour shifts without any sleep, without any real breaks or rest, just rushing around and then studying in my free time, I reached a point where it was just too much. And I think at that point, my body was trying to speak to me in some way. And for me, what happened was I developed an autoimmune condition where I started losing my hair in a pretty sudden fashion. So I noticed at first I had like a bald spot at the back of my head. And then over the course of a couple of months, I actually lost all of my scalp hair and then eyebrows, eyelashes, body hair, like really, really quickly. And this was between my third and fourth year of medical school. And
Yeah.
by the time I had lost my hair, it was about 6 months before we were supposed to get married. I was getting close to graduation. I just wanted to kind of get through. I think, like a lot of women, like we just want to kind of keep going. We don't want to stop and pause. Often we can't. And so I kept going and I was dealing with this new condition. I had found ways to, wear wigs and do my makeup, but I really wasn't feeling like myself. And I was really feeling, I would say, like on the edge of a burnout. But I ended up graduating, got married, came back home to finish up my training and do my residency training. And yeah, and then kind of just, yeah, after about 2 years, when I finally finished everything, I thought like I really need to take some time for me and figure out like what it is I want. Can't keep going at this pace. I knew I didn't really fit into the traditional medical system. I wanted to do something different, and I needed to sort of reprioritize myself and my health. So that's sort of where my like journey into wellness really began. And I started exploring like nutrition and exercise, doing more yoga, really learning stress management techniques, working on my resiliency, and prioritizing my sleep. So those were sort of the four areas that I really worked on, along with like just spending more time with family and friends and my husband, and just prioritizing myself. And then slowly from there, like building a career that worked for me, that I could still feel fulfilled, still feel like I'm helping people, but also staying true to taking care of myself. So that was sort of the beginning of the journey, and all
Yeah.
of that like changed a few years later too when I became a mom and sort of had to juggle at that point like motherhood with working with my health and all the different like moving pieces that we all juggle as parents. But it brought me down this path to wanting to share what I've learned with others, wanting to work primarily with women who are also juggling all these things and who need sort of help to reprioritize their health and their well-being.
Wow, it's so much in there. Wow, there's I want to go back because there's so many things that we could talk about just in that, cliff notes of your background right there. So one thing that stuck out to me is medical school. And it's so crazy because I have friends that are doctors and they tell me about medical school. By the way, I also thought I wanted to be a doctor when I was younger because it was from that same drive that I wanted to help people and I was always interested in food. So I thought like, yeah, like so I don't know. I thought I didn't know what a dietitian was, so I thought the doctor would be the route. And then towards like my college year, I discovered what a dietitian was, so I became a dietitian. But anyways, I have one of my good friends. He started out studying with me, and then he continues to be a doctor. And the medical school, like it's so crazy because it's like about you think it's medicine and health, and the whole experience of the students is like the antithesis of health, the long hours and the lack of sleep, and like you're supposed to be, you have such an important job and such a like responsibility, but yet you're not given the opportunity to perform at your optimum. And that's like why is there such a contradiction there? Do
Yeah,
you know
that's
where that
totally
comes from?
true. Yeah, and I felt it like the first time I walked into the hospital, I felt it too, and kind of seeing like the focus more on like sick care and seeing everybody being like everyone's doing their best, but everyone's like overworked and tired, and there's not
Yeah.
enough resources. And, even like if you look at the food in the hospital for patients is like pretty terrible. And like there's just a lot of things that I was like, why? Like, why is it this way? And then, yeah, you become part of the system where you kind of just have to fill that role of like, at the time being like a medical student and just running around doing all the things and just not like barely having the time to go to the washroom, like let alone like even eat something, like it was hard. And the pressure there. Yeah, I felt like you were kind of going through the system and then you were being spit out at the end of the system, like kind of like
Right.
half the person you were before. Like I had more of a balance. I had like such a balance going into medical school, and then it kind of like disappeared while I was in school. And so, yeah, it took me some time to figure out that like I didn't necessarily want to be part of that system because I felt like it was broken and I knew it wasn't sustainable for me. But yeah, somehow I was supposed to be helping others and helping heal
Yeah, and
others,
it comes
yet I
on your
was,
expense. Yeah, that's what
yeah,
I feel like something needs to happen in yeah, like systemic level where the
yeah,
doctors are allowed to have the time to also prioritize their health. I'm sure that comes later, but at least in
yeah.
the early years, it's like I understand the point of like maybe it's like to build resilience or I don't
Mhm.
know, but still there should be like there's a fine line between total like burning out the people that are supposed to help other people. And
Right.
we'll talk about it later, the importance of sleep and
Yeah.
nutrition and
Yeah.
all of this. Yeah, I feel like the doctor should like be able to prioritize that so that they're performing at their best.
Yeah. And as a patient, like you would want like a doctor who's performing at their best, who's
Right,
feeling
got
well,
some
who's
sleep
rested.
and right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's a
Yeah.
well, that's one thing. And then the second thing that stood out to me was the hair loss. That sounds like
Hmm.
something that could be like so scary because I've dealt with
Yeah.
alopecia. It's like more like a traction of like alopecia in certain areas, like when I used to have locks. So I noticed it like in different areas of my hairline, and this was like scary for me. But I can't
Yeah.
imagine like what it felt like of losing all of your hair, and you know how like women, especially
Yeah.
society, they put so much on hair. How did that feel? Like you're in medical school, like you have exams that you need to be focused on, and then you're getting married. Like, did that affect, like, how did that affect you?
Yeah, it's a good question. It was definitely hard. And it actually took me like years to be able to talk so openly without like getting emotional about it. Because at the time it was a lot and it felt like almost like a shameful secret. Like I was trying to sort of hide it. Also because of the nature of what I was doing. Like I was in the hospital doing different rotations, like always seeing different people every day, different patients, different supervisors. So it wasn't like I could just walk around. I felt like without a wig or without, looking kind of quote unquote normal. So it was definitely like a lot to process. It affected my self-esteem. I felt like I was actually a pretty good place before the hair loss happened. Like I was 22, 23, and those teen years are like really rocky. It takes a while to kind of get it, you feel good about yourself. And I was finally feeling good. I was in a good relationship, like things were good. And then this happened and it completely like destabilized me. So yeah, it was a lot to deal with. And I think like part of me didn't deal with it. Like, of course, I was sad and emotional, but I think I kind of repressed it a little bit to kind of
Yeah.
go into survival mode and just be able to like graduate and finish everything I needed to do. And then it took me years to kind of figure out like the best sort of like physical things I could do to feel normal, to feel like myself, to feel beautiful again, like in terms of like permanent makeup. And I wear like hair pieces today that are like made for my head that like feel really comfortable. I can go swimming, do yoga, like do all the normal things. So it
Yeah.
took me a while to get there. But at the time, it was really difficult in my early 20s. And yeah, dealing with everything else at the same time. And you're right, because
Yeah.
there's so much like our hair is a big part of our identity, I think, as women too. Hmm.
Yeah, and what's cool about today, especially with like all the hair pieces and the wigs, you can make they're like undetectable now.
Yeah,
Like they can look better than like your natural hair. So it's like you can play with it. So it's like of
yeah,
course I'm sure like I don't know, I can't I'm sure it's not like having your real hair, but at least to everybody else it looks great. So you're But that's
Yeah, yeah,
cool.
and
I
I
didn't
do
know.
rock the bald head sometimes too, like around the house and whatever. Like it's in some ways I'm like, oh, I can just go exercise in the middle of the day. I take my wig off, I exercise, I get sweaty, I put the wig back on, my hair still looks great. So like, I laugh about the fact that like I do there are like some small small advantages
Yeah.
sometimes. Yeah.
Wow, yeah, and I can relate to that. Like sometimes we can just be so overwhelmed with things that you're just like, "Ugh, I don't have time for this too." So you just like kind of
Yes.
repress it. So I guess that's where you were in that time, and maybe that worked for you because if you would just, I don't know, just sink into that, you probably wouldn't like it would affect your performance in your exams and
Yeah.
relationship and speaking of relationship, how did your fiance at the time?
Yeah.
Yeah, so your fiance, now husband, how did he support you during that time?
Yeah, he was really wonderful, and I really think I wouldn't have gotten through it as well, like without him. And it was hard. We were, I guess, 2 years into our relationship when like I had the hair loss. I was still relatively fresh, and we were like newly engaged, and it was a lot of pressure, I think, to put on to like a new relationship. But he was, totally there for me, really supported me. Kind of reinforced the fact that like he was my person, and
Yeah.
like by the time we got to our wedding, like we were both like really, really committed and we knew, that we would be there for each other like through everything. And I think it was in the end like a good foundation in a way, as hard as it was, like it made me realize that we were solid and we could get through, whatever life's challenges, was whatever life was going to throw at us in the future. And yeah, it's definitely, yeah, worked out really well for us.
Yeah, right. 3 kids later.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And so you were practicing medicine, you were working in a hospital, and you realized that you wanted something that allowed you to prioritize your health and something that would be more sustainable, especially you said 2 years after you started, like that's when you had your first child. So were you a bit afraid? Because I feel like that's another thing. Society also puts a lot of pressure on us, like, oh, you went to school for this and you need to do this, especially the older generation. Now, not so much. Millennials will switch jobs like every 4 or 5 years. But did you get any pushback from, like, I don't know, family or friends, like, no, you work so hard for this, you need to stick it out and be a doctor for, like, I don't know, as long as possible?
Yeah, I think a lot of it actually came from myself. Like I felt like I put pressure on my own shoulders. Like I was the first doctor in my family. It wasn't like, my family was like pushing medicine onto me. There wasn't all of this pressure. I think for sure like they wanted me to be happy and they were hoping that like after putting all that time and effort and money into medicine that I could continue with it. So they were supportive that way. But I think it was self-imposed and a little bit of like that pressure that you feel from society as well, that there's this one path. And I was seeing all of my friends and like colleagues kind of follow the more traditional path. So it was hard to imagine like what that path would look like for me. And I never felt ready to close the door on medicine. I haven't, like I still practice today. And part of it was like maybe like part of me was like, well, I still like there's aspects of it I really enjoy. And maybe there's a way for me to find a path within medicine that I can enjoy that isn't, the traditional opening up a practice, having, working in the hospital, all of that. So I gave myself the time and the space to figure that out over like the first few years and tried different things and experimented and then found, different things within medicine that worked for me. And then also started developing then the coaching and like kind of my own business outside of it. So I kind of had, a foot in each area and like kind of could explore different things.
Yeah, and I really like that combination. You have like a medical background, but you're also open to like more, I don't know if you call them traditional or um, alternative. Even though I don't like that name, alternative medicine. I think they can be complementary to each
Yeah.
other.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely complementary. And I think like that whole focus that I have on like nutrition and exercise and sleep and stress, those are things that are super important in all aspects of health and probably affect like all illnesses and medical diagnoses, but they're not things that we really get taught in medical school. We have very, very little, nutrition education, very little. Like we talk about how like exercise and lifestyle is like, usually the first line for treatment of most things, but we don't really dive into like what does that actually mean and what does that look like for people. So I think they definitely, yeah, they complement each other and there's a role for both.
Right. And I read on your bio how you like preventative medicine, and that's how I like to look at it too. I like preventative, like nutrition and a preventative. Like if you eat well now, you can prevent diabetes, you can prevent,
Yeah.
all these metabolic diseases and obesity and things. So I want you
Yeah.
to share a little bit about your pillars of health for all the mamas out
Yeah.
there, something that can help us, adopt healthier habits.
Yeah, sure, sure. And like the way that I approach health is just around like sustainable changes and small shifts because we're busy, like as moms, juggling all the things with work and life and parenting. So I don't believe that we need to make these huge shifts. Like I think these small incremental shifts make a difference, and starting with like a realistic approach and then building on that. So the four pillars that I focus on come from the field of lifestyle medicine, which is like an area that I've gotten extra training in over the past few years. And it's really like evidence-based things that we can do that are in our control that can make a big difference. So there's nutrition. So I know that you know a lot about that, but
Yeah, but
focusing
we
on a
can
whole food
share. Yeah.
diet, yeah, cooking ourselves from home, like having recipes and things that we come back to that like nourish us, fuel us, focusing on like the protein, fiber, and healthy fats, and kind of building our meals around that. So that's one key pillar. And then there's exercise. So again, here, starting where you're at, we know that like any movement is better than no movement. So adding in more movement into our lives, whether that's like just like smaller bursts of movements or like, more sort of organized, structured movement around like cardiovascular strength or mobility. So that's another area. And then there's stress management, which we know
Mm,
is super important. And that's one area that I like really, really prioritize,
totally
knowing what my
underestimated.
background. Yeah. And building our resiliency. So finding ways to, deal with stress and, small moments of self-care. Like most of us don't have a ton of time to like, do like 3-hour yoga practices or go to the spa or that sort of thing. So small things that we can do in our days that help to kind of just like, whew, like bring the stress level down. And then sleep and prioritizing sleep and good quality sleep and making sure that we get our sort of 7 to 8 hours and optimizing our sleep environment and working through all of that as well. So those are really the four key areas that I work on with clients and prioritize for myself.
Well, I love these pillars, and I really feel like people don't like. I think when you hear all these nutrition gurus or fitness coaches, and they come out with all these like gadgets and new diets, and sometimes it annoys me because I'm like, you guys are making it so complicated, and it's really simple. Not to say that it's not
Yeah.
challenging to be disciplined and to follow, but it's
Hmm.
simple. Like eat well, sleep, move your body, control your
Yeah.
stress. These are things that don't cost a lot of money. You can like exercise, of course, like if you get a trainer and everything, it could be easier.
Yeah.
But essentially, you don't need a prescription for any of these things. And that's what
Yeah.
I think is beautiful. Like sometimes people come, I'm sure this happens to you. They'll come and ask you about a supplement. Like they'll be like, "Oh, should I take Irish sea moss? Should I take moringa?" And I'm like, what is the purpose? What are you taking this for?
Yeah.
And then they're like, "Oh yeah, I heard it'll help me like lose weight. It'll help me like sleep." And I'm like, "Wait, so like it doesn't work like that. You can't eat everything you want and then have some Irish sea moss and it's just gonna come off." But I always tell people like, if you just get the basics down, then you're like 90% of the way there. All these other supplements and things and tweaks, of course, these things can be beneficial, but get those down first, and then we can talk about optimizing. And I love this approach about the like micro goals too, because some people have such an all or nothing mentality. They'll say,
Yeah.
"Oh, I don't have time to exercise," and you can say like, "Just do 5 minutes a day." Oh, that's not enough, but it's more than you're doing now. So
Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. It is all about like laying the foundation, right? Starting with the basics, the foundational stuff, and then we can look at exactly tweaking and optimizing. But most of us, like, we're lacking the foundation, right? Like there are things that we could do, and like you said, it's simple but not easy because the implementation piece can be hard, and then the consistency as well. So
right,
it's like a muscle. Like the more you're consistent with it, the more it becomes easier with time. But having that support and that accountability can help a lot with that as we're
right.
making changes.
And that's where most people, I'm like that too. That's where coaches come in and they can
Yeah.
help guide you and motivate you and all that. Because I'm like, I know the benefits of exercise. I actually like to walk, but like weight training and things like that, I have to go to a class. Otherwise, I'm not going to do it on my own. Well, at least I won't be consistent for long. But if I'm like going to a class, I know I have to show up and, be accountable and everything, then
Yeah.
I do it. So that's where we come in.
Yes. And there's different ways coaches are great, friends, family members. There can be like self-accountability, like even like just tracking, like if you keep like track of, whatever your goal is and you're putting check marks or stickers or whatever it is, like whatever gives you that visual can be helpful too. So you have some sort of sense of accountability and support. And you can also track your progress that way.
Yeah. And it also gives you a sense of accomplishment when you say, "Oh
100%.
yeah, I've done this," and you see a little bit of progress. So yeah, I'm all for tracking as well.
Yes, yes, exactly.
And do you find, do you mostly work with like moms or women in general?
Yeah, so women in general, mostly moms, I would say, women usually in their 30s and 40s, who are in that zone of like just having all the pressure from like having young kids often and dealing sometimes with like aging parents and then like work responsibilities and life. And I find that in that age group too, like what happens is what used to work in your 20s no longer works. Like it used to be easier in our 20s. And then as you get into closer to those perimenopause years, things kind of shift, hormones are shifting,
Yeah,
life is shifting, you don't have as much time as you used to. So it can be kind of difficult to figure out what to do. And then I find that there's also just so much noise out there. There's so many like, different influencers and people who are saying like you need to do the ketogenic diet or you need to go
right.
paleo or you need to go vegan, whatever it is. Like there's like this all of these different, philosophies and it can be really confusing. And then with the supplements and the quick fixes that people are throwing at you and it's like it's noisy. So I'm there to kind of help filter the noise
Yeah,
and figure out the next right step for you. That's sort of the way I look at it.
yeah, I love that. And do you find that moms tend to like be reluctant to prioritize their health because they have so much going on there oftentimes, especially like when you approach the 40s, it's not only the kids, but then you have aging parents. So
Yeah.
how do you speak to the moms out there that probably it's time for them to start prioritizing their health, but they're convinced that they don't have the time?
Yeah, yeah. And I would say like you don't want to wait until you have to. Like you don't want to wait until
Right,
there's a health crisis, right? Because that's the other thing is that eventually our bodies will speak to us. So if you're go, go, go all the time, you're not prioritizing your health, like at some point your body will say like that's enough. And whether that's, like an autoimmune thing or whether that's a metabolic health issue or whether it's just like burnout or feeling tired, like all of these things eventually manifest. So I would say like you don't have the time not to, like you need to prioritize this
right,
in order to keep going, to be there for your kids, for your parents, for your family. Like this is really, really important. And then the other thing I would say is it doesn't have to take a lot of time. So as we were talking about before, like we can
right,
find small pockets of time. One of the first things I do with clients is I do a time and energy audit where we really look at like, okay, like where are you spending your time? Where is your energy going? Is there a way that we can focus on, getting your energy back or like getting you like energy boosts so that you can spend more time on your health? Like there's different things that we can tweak. But definitely, like you'll just be a happier, healthier, better person overall if you can prioritize your health, and that'll just
right.
have ripple effects in all areas of your life. Yeah,
Exactly. You'll be able to give more because it sounds cliche, but when they say
yeah,
you can't pour from an empty cup, but it's true. Like at some point when
yeah,
you're like done, you don't have any more to give. So if you take a reset and start prioritizing the pillars of health, then you'll see, wow, like I'm energized again.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yes.
Wow. Thank you so much. So, do you have like, I like to ask if you have any self-care ritual or routine that you like to do. I know as moms, it's usually not something extravagant, but what is something that you do for yourself to help you like replenish your energy stores?
Yeah, yeah, it's a good question. I think I've been doing this forever, so I almost don't consider it a self-care, but I think it is. I have a little bedtime routine every night where I like to take a bath. I like to read before bed. So I have this sort of like 30 to 45-minute
Oh,
routine,
I
I guess,
love
where I
it.
kind of dim the lights, relax, take my bath, read, and just kind of, get myself my body calmed down and ready for bed. So that's something I do every night. I think it kind of when I had like newborns and stuff, that kind of shifted a little bit. But like as soon as my kids
Yeah.
were like had a regular bedtime, I was like, nope, I'm doing this for myself again. So that's sort of a non-negotiable. That's just part of my life. And then I think like my other like there's a couple of like other self-care things I do, like regular exercise. I consider that self-care. And then I have a weekly dance class that I go to
Oh,
in the
cool.
evening, which I love. And it's just like so much fun. And so that I do every week and it's on my calendar. My husband knows, like it's all like the kids know, like they're like, yep, mom's going to dance class. And it's just
Yeah.
something that I do. Um, and then I think that like the other things that I do are like small. So like right now, like just before our interview, like I went for like a 10-minute walk like around the block just to get fresh air. That's self-care for me in the middle of the day to do
Yeah.
that. Taking a couple deep breaths sometimes, like during the day, if I'm feeling a little bit tired or stressed, I'll just sit and take a minute or two to do some deep breathing. I integrate like small meditation practices as well in my week. So just like small little things that add up and make a difference.
Yeah, definitely. Those are all lovely acts of self-care. I love the dance class.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's always fun. Fun, like sometimes exercise, it doesn't have to be like, people think, oh, the gym, like those are great too. Weight training is important and cardio. But
Yes.
dance is like something where it's also a creative outlet and it's exercise at the same time. You don't even feel like, that you're doing some strenuous exercise. So,
Exactly. And it's like a time where I don't think, like, is it, we learn a routine. So like the teacher teaches us and it's fun. I'm just like focused in the moment. And yeah, it really like my brain shuts off otherwise. So it's really, yeah, a nice thing to have.
wow, awesome. Well, thank you so much, Valerie. This was really a cool conversation, but I would love for you to share where people can connect with you or work with you.
Sure, sure. Yeah, no, thank you so much. This was really great to chat with you. So I'm primarily on Instagram. People want to connect with me there. Feel free to send me a DM and say hi. So it's I'm sure we'll include it, but it's Dr.
Yeah.
Valerie Hertzog on Instagram, and I have my website as well. And I would love to also share a free health assessment with anybody listening. So I'm sure we can link to that as well. So if you kind of want to just do your own self check-in and see where you're at with your health and with those 4 pillars, that's a really nice tool to start to use and just see, yeah, where it is that you can focus on and what are some of the small shifts that you can start making to feel more energized and healthier.
Yeah, I love it because some people are like, maybe they're not even aware like what's going on or where to start. So, well, thank you so much. I hope we can do this again sometimes. I really feel like we have a lot in common
Yes,
as far
there's
as
so
our
much more to
approach.
talk about. Yeah,
Yeah. Bye.
thank you. Bye.
And it's a ticket talking Mazda for the biggest. That's a comma and a comma and a comma. Gotta get it, get it. And it's a ticket talking Mazda for the biggest. That's a comma and a comma and a comma. Gotta get it.